Well. Hello and welcome everyone to yet another community office hours. Today we are joined by myself, Taylor, Paddy, and Kerim. So we have a two's a party, three's a crowd, and we are very happy to be chatting with you today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for chatting with me.
It's going to be a fun one today. I'm really excited. We're going to be talking the Terraform plugin SDK, and so if you have any questions when it comes to the Terraform plugin SDK or anything like that, please feel free to raise those up to us in chat, and we'll be happy to kind of talk more through that. Really quick, I'm going to.
I've actually got a first question already.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to run through the...
All three at once.
I'm going to run through the community guidelines really quick, and then we can get to it. So this is a public event. Really what this is this simplifies down to please be excellent to one another, be respectful and kind and professional and patient. If you want to read more about our community guidelines, please feel free to go to HashiCorp.com/community-guidelines, and you can read up more on there. But we like to have fun and love it when everybody else is able to have fun as well. So please be kind, excellent, and wonderful today. And with that, I will jump back into our presentation. And howdy, everybody. So Kerim, or let's do some introductions. Paddy, would you like to give us your elevator pitch and tell us more about who you are, what you do, and what you're looking at today?
Absolutely. I love the way you phrased this an elevator pitch. It's like I've got 5 minutes in the elevator to sell you on that myself. No, my name's Paddy. I'm Paddy Carver. I'm the engineering lead for the Terraform plugin SDK. I use he, him pronouns. And yeah, my job is really to help people develop Terraform providers and to kind of make the process of developing Terraform providers easier, make it more reliable and more robust in experience, and kind of make sure that Terraform's ecosystem continues to grow.
Awesome. And Kerim, would you like to introduce yourself today as well?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for your service, Paddy, because the stuff you do is important. We're at more than 1,000 providers, and the work you do contributes to that, and that's, to me, is just amazing. Hey folks, my name is Kerim. I'm a senior developer advocate at HashiCorp, where I focus on the infrastructure line of products. So that's Packer and Terraform for me right now. And yeah, just happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, we have a action-packed list of questions for you today, Paddy. Really curious on hearing some more when it comes to Terraform plugin SDK items. That's actually one of the questions that I get asked most is how do I create a custom provider? What does that entail? So again, very excited to kind of ask you some of these questions. And then for everyone out there in the audience and YouTube chat, please feel free to raise up any questions that you might have on that front. And let's start talking about providers. So for people that are newer to the project that might not know what the Terraform plugin SDK is, or hearing about that for the first time, can you tell us kind of like what it does, what problems it helps solve, just kind of more about the Terraform plugin SDK in general?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. So the idea of the SDK is really, as you kind of mentioned, you want to build a custom Terraform provider. You want to build an extension onto Terraform to help it do more things, talk to a new API, talk to a new system. That's kind of what the job of the SDK is there to do. It's the interface between your provider and Terraform, and it kind of provides an abstraction above Terraform that your provider gets to be built on. It's a Go library that you import into your provider, and it provides a bunch of interfaces that you kind of need to fulfill that then Terraform will drive around. And I guess the best way to kind of think about it is if Terraform is if you think about it as Terraform is like an execution engine, a declarative way to drive some actions. It takes care of the diffing and all of that stuff. But really, at the end of the day, the providers are what's doing the real world impact of Terraform. They're the ones that's creating your infrastructure, ordering your pizza, what have you. That's actually provider code that's written on top of the SDK. And so kind of the life cycle of events is Terraform reads your config, figures out what you want to be made, reads your state, figures out what state it's currently in, kind of generates a diff off that, asks the provider to massage the diff a little bit, shows that to users like, hey, is this what you want to happen? The user's like, yep, go ahead, apply that. And then it sends those instructions off to the provider being like, hey, this resource needs to be in this state now. And the provider's job is then to take that resource and make it happen, make it go into that state and kind of power apply. Does that all make sense?
Absolutely, and I really like how you brought up the example of pizza and everything on that front. I know that Kerim and I do quite a bit of talking about the Domino's provider for Terraform, and I got the chance to use that last holiday season, and saw that there could benefit from a few updates on that front, but as well as we could always add a couple more pizza providers. I don't think that they support Domino's by you, Kerim, so that's something that we could always maybe that's a hack day project or weekend project we could look at some point in time. But
I love that provider. It's always my go-to example because how that provider got started is I was working on the Google Cloud Platform provider at the time, actually, and I was part of it on HashiCorp, and there's a team at Google that works on it, and we kind of work together as one big team. And we were talking about April 1st coming up and April Fool's Day and all of that, and we were like, what are some great jokes that we could play for that? And we were like, oh, like don't like sub shops and pizza places and things like that have an API? Couldn't we like make Terraform apply, kind of take care of these, take care of ordering us food and stuff like that? Wouldn't that be funny? And we were like, oh yeah, that'd be great. And we kind of talked about it and it never went anywhere, except one day, one of the people on the team, Nathan, came in and he was like, by the way, I wrote it, and Google's lawyers signed off on it and let him release it as a provider, but he had to convince Google's lawyers to let him ship Terraform provider Domino's. But yeah, no, it was great. There was that, and the other one that I probably won't get a chance to do now, but I always wanted to have a Terraform remote state backend that was based on the blockchain as an April Fool's joke, so that way you would store your Terraform remote state on the blockchain, which you should never do because Terraform state should always be treated as sensitive. But that's always one of my other go-to examples of demo illustrations.
I did not know about that one, so that's that's definitely one I'll have to take a look at. I also saw that I did see a couple fun providers in there. I think that one that Kerim and I have talked about a few times as well is the Hue Light provider. So we have a few of those in our house. We just got some accent lights for outside of the house too, which I just recently found out that they made some for outdoors too. But very fun, and I can't wait to look. I'm really looking forward to using Terraform to set my light state, so that's gonna be fun. Excellent, that's so cool. I had never heard that story about just kind of like the start of the Domino's provider, and that's a fun backstory. Interesting. So when it comes
I think the point I like most about this is that when you build random stuff like that, which is clearly not the traditional infrastructure, though one could argue pizza is definitely part of your infrastructure because it's part of your engineering task force, right? So it at that point becomes part of your engineering infrastructure. So when you build those random providers, you actually run into all the things that the SDK might not have covered before because it's a non-traditional use case. Like, how would you deal with a destroy? Because technically the resource goes away when you consume the pizza.
I believe the README says for the project says that Terraform destroy is implemented in user space by the practitioner eating the pizza, as I believe how they decided to handle destroy.
Yeah, I think the format might be an interesting one as well.
I really do like that, and so yeah, hopefully there's no deposed state or anything like that happens as you eat that pizza and use that provider.
That's why I
So
love doing these office hours, because it's just coming in and telling stories about Terraform. Last time we got to drop the fact that Terraform's codename was Constellation. This time we're telling the origin story of Terraform provider Domino's. I
that
don't know. I'm running out of origin stories here.
it's even more fun to me to kind of focus on those backstories and what ends up on the cutting room floor. We don't really use DVDs anymore, so we don't get these DVD extras when we see releases and things like that within Terraform. So thank you. That's
Yeah, it's one of the things I love about being an engineer at HashiCorp. Is one of the things we do is we write a lot of stuff down, and a lot of stuff just stays around for the history of the company. So Katie, one of the engineers on my team, we did a lightning talk at HashiConf Digital together about the history of Terraform provider development, and we got to kind of just surface all of the history of the SDK and kind of all of the change it's gone through and how it's evolved and things like that. I just think that's really fascinating. That's one of my favorite parts about being an engineer, is understanding the context things happened in and kind of surfacing the archaeology and the history of the systems we build. I'm just endlessly fascinated by that. But a lot of people don't realize that, like, the SDK we develop with today, the one we're talking about that you deliver pizzas with, but also that stands up infrastructure that's mission critical, that powers some of the biggest companies out there today. That that SDK was built in 2014, in the summer of 2014, and roughly looks the same. Like, what provider developers do today and what they were doing in 2014, 15, 16 is really not that far a distance. And I think that's a really cool piece of engineering history, that the use cases and the context that the SDK exists in has evolved so much, and yet the act of engaging with it has stayed the same so much, which I'm ruining. But that's a conversation for us later in this office hours, I think.
When it comes to all of these, I just think that it's fascinating to kind of get that insight, and that's one of the things I like about our setup within our teams here at HashiCorp as well, is that having RFCs to refer to, you don't have to scroll back and kind of look back into other types of documentation or history. It's all kind of right there for you, and why changes and why things got made, why things got done, and I find that really helpful too. I started a year ago here at HashiCorp, and being able to look back in time at why certain decisions were made was just really helpful. And then it is fun to hear those stories as well that you're bringing up on that front. Awesome. So with that, can you kind of tell us what's going on with the Terraform plugin framework and other things that are happening in, on, or around the Terraform provider SDK space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned that I'm ruining the fact that we've maintained for 6-7 years, somewhere 6.5 years now. Developing providers has basically been the same. My team is kind of out to ruin that right now, and I think it's worthwhile talking a little bit about why. We've discussed this at previous office hours, but I know our audience might not be consistent, so we may as well kind of tread some old ground there a little bit. Terraform 0.12, I don't know if everybody in the audience remembers it, but it was kind of a fundamental reset of some of the foundations of Terraform. It was Terraform's problem space is something that we discovered as it was used and as we built it and things like that. And so our ideas and our abstractions and our concepts behind Terraform kind of grew and evolved over the years. And when Terraform 0.12 came out, I want to say it was in 2019. I'm going to be honest, those whole 2 years were kind of a blur. In 2019, when it came out, the SDK didn't really get updated for it. We just kind of kept the SDK the same because, as you said, we've got 1,000 providers. There's just a lot of provider code out there. And 0.12 was a hard process for us as a team and a hard process for us as an ecosystem, but it would have been an impossible process if we had been like, okay, so you all need to rewrite all of your providers to work with our new understanding of how to make Terraform behave reliably in all these situations, to kind of make sure that all of the rules we've discovered, not rules we've created, but just discovered, are things that are constraints that Terraform needs to follow. If we make you rewrite your provider to follow all of those rules right now, this is a non-starter. We can't do that. And so we kept the SDK, keeping the same abstractions, keeping the same surfaced ideas, and we just kind of shoehorned them into fitting into 0.12. It was kind of the mashing together of these two different ideas, and the join wasn't as seamless as you might hope. There were things that Terraform 0.12 enabled that we couldn't take advantage of. There were things that the SDK did that didn't fully make sense in the new system, and Terraform had to build in some leniency for the old SDK to kind of allow for some of the incorrect behavior that it was doing, where it's just making Terraform less reliable. And I know this paints a really gloomy picture of it. I do want to pause here and just be very clear. There's no new instability that we're talking about here that hasn't existed with Terraform the entire time. Like, it's not like it's going to break on you randomly one day. It's just some of the funny behavior that I suspect a lot of our users have just gotten used to doesn't actually need to exist. We know how to fix it. We're just kind of trying to drag the ecosystem in that direction with us, and that takes time. I keep thinking of my job as kind of being the captain of the Titanic. You got this big boat with a lot of people on it, and you got to steer it. And I'm hoping for a better outcome this time than last time, because I feel like we saw an iceberg in the distance, and we started adjusting course. We're the alternate universe Titanic, where the Watchmen saw what was going on.
I think many of us are rooting for you.
What was that?
Many of us are rooting for you to see that outcome changed.
I appreciate it. And it's an outcome we can't change without the help of all of our ecosystem, and it's with all of the people at HashiCorp who are working on this. And again, I don't want to paint too dire a picture. Everything's fine. Terraform works. Like, this is not a panic situation, but it is a situation where we have some technical debt and we have some legacy assumptions that no longer apply. And I think that's kind of the takeaway here, is just that you've got some assumptions that no longer hold true in the context that we're in. And so when I started on this team, I came in with basically marching orders. I came in with, okay, we're in a hole. We're in a situation where we've got these assumptions that no longer apply, and we have no idea how to get out of this situation. We know we need to get out of this situation, but doing it is really expensive. So what my mandate, I guess, when I joined the team was, Paddy, come and figure out how we're going to get out of this hole. And I would love to say I did that. I did not. I came in, I collaborated with the team, and we found a way out together. But so we've been working for the last year to ship that way out. We launched Terraform Plugin Go. We launched Terraform Plugin Mux. I don't know that we've got time to talk about those today, but the idea was we developed this vision of what modern Terraform provider development might look like. What would Terraform provider development look like if we built the plugin SDK today, knowing all that we know, and it built on the foundations of 0.12? What if we built it for the context we were in instead of the context we started with 5 years ago? And so we took that design brief basically and figured out how we were going to get there and bring the ecosystem along with us to kind of make that happen. And it's a whole fascinating thing. I don't know that we've got time to talk about it today, but the strategy, how it evolved, was really convoluted. But essentially, we decided that we were going to try and make sure that providers written now did not need to use the new SDK, or did not need to use the SDK that was written for 0.11 and below, even if we couldn't move all of the old providers off of it immediately. So you're like, okay, that'll at least stop adding to the technical debt. That'll help us get out of the situation we're in. And so I'm sorry, when you asked this question, I bet you were not expecting this long-winded a history lesson, but
hoping for it.
Yeah, this is helpful.
But yeah, so that's kind of brings me to Terraform Plugin Framework. We talked about Terraform Plugin Go, Terraform Plugin Mux. They're a long conversation in their own right, but I'm going to take a drink really quick because I've been talking for too long.
No worries, and really quick, I'll just interject and say that it's been, with even going from Terraform 0.11 to 0.12 for most teams and companies and people I know at a couple previous jobs, just that alone was kind of a big thing. And it's interesting to see how Terraform has changed and kind of is moving into the future with all of these wonderful features and capabilities that we're getting as we go through each release, right? And it's I've had people get really excited about that, but at that same point, it's like, but this is something I have to maintain. This is something I have to upgrade. Can you just let me know, when 1.0 is out? Some things like that. It's like I hear you, I see you, but at the same point, it's like, let's find a way to create a bridge to make this easier, or better explain these things, or show you kind of how these things are helpful. And like with anything, you can't just mow your lawn once and call it done, right? Yeah, it's unfortunately I'm bummed about that too, unless you have AstroTurf or something like that. But it's a difficult thing to do. It's a difficult thing to manage, and any ways that help create a better experience or make it easier to maintain. At the end of the day, when you can pay down those kinds of technical debt or set things up for that kind of technical success, I'm just happy to have that, and thank you for doing that with the SDK and kind of thinking through these difficult problems. It's easy when you know the answer, and it's just complete. It's not a fun place to be when you don't kind of have that perspective and that vision.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for all the work you're doing with, helping people to upgrade and to kind of make sure we as engineers understand the community we're serving. So that's really the end goal of all of this, is to make sure people are having good experiences with Terraform. And sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No worries. I think it was mostly around like 0.12 and just kind of and some things therein.
And I think we were getting brought up to plugin framework at that point. So we talked about plugin Go, plugin Mux, how they're a conversation in their own right. They're projects that we shipped earlier at the end of last year. We shipped those projects, and they were really stepping stones for us to go where we are, which is plugin framework. And what plugin framework is really a next generation SDK. Really, how we were talking about it is, what does SDK v3 look like? Like that was kind of the project's goal here. So why do we call it the framework? Why is it plugin framework instead of plugin SDK? The history there is that when the SDK was started 5 years ago, it was the only option. Like you built with that, or you did not build a provider. And so it was the most stable option out there. And it was there were no providers built on other things. Right now, there are a bunch of providers built on plugin SDK v2, and if we ship a plugin SDK v3, these Semver rules mean that we are, as soon as we ship the first version, we are locked into that API, if that makes sense. Sorry, I don't know why my throat always goes dry as soon as I go right on camera, but it's like, hey, you're going to talk a bunch. Let your throat close right up.
It's like Schrodinger's cat just happens to be the dryness of your throat, and if the camera's on or not, is it dry? Exactly. Is it not?
Yeah. So as soon as if we shipped it as part of the plugin SDK, we would have to ship it as plugin SDK v3, because shipping as SDK v2 would break all our existing providers, which we can't do. But as soon as we ship it as plugin SDK v3, we're locking in our API. We're saying, here are our choices. We're confident in them. Go ahead, build on them. We will not break them. And the problem is we're really building something almost from scratch here. We're really kind of taking a step back, saying, wait, what should this look like given the context we have now, in trying to ship it. And the hard part is plugin SDK has 5, 6 years, 7 years of history behind it. It was built through iteration. It was built through defining an interface and then discovering what people need and adding and changing and doing things as necessary to make it all kind of work. That gives us the wide, diverse ecosystem of providers we have today. And if we're going to replace it, I feel really strongly that we should have the opportunity to do the same thing with its replacement. Otherwise, we're replacing something very mature with something very immature. And I didn't want to make that transition from SDK v2, where it's mature and ready and reliable, to SDK v3, which no one has ever built a provider with before. I did not think that was an appropriate kind of API upgrade strategy. And so instead, we were like, great, we're going to ship as Terraform plugin framework instead. A new repo, a new Go module. We can ship as V0, 0.1. And that'll give us time to iterate on the API, really understand the user experience of using this thing. And then when we're ready, when we're confident in the API choices that we've made, and we know that this is going to be as stable as SDK v2 is for people, we can turn it into SDK v3 at that point and close down the old repo. And so that's what Terraform plugin framework is. We took a really long time to understand what that would look like. We spent a lot of time doing research, looking at people's providers, looking at how people develop providers, and kind of trying to figure out and understand what abstraction makes sense for that. What do people hate about the current SDK? What do people love about it? What do we want to keep? What do we want to redo? And how do we kind of piece all of this together to provide a path to solving the problem you're there to solve, which is how do I build a Terraform provider as quickly, easily, and reliably as I possibly can? And that's kind of what we were trying to solve with this. We spent, I want to say, 4 months doing research on this thing and taking notes and making decisions. Just last month, we had a week of decision sprints where we wrote up design documents, which you can still find in the Terraform plugin framework repository. We wrote up a bunch of these design documents that were like, here's decisions we need to make that there are multiple good answers for. How are we going to decide this? And we really just literally went through and explored the problem space and wrote all the context down, and then sat in a meeting together and we're like, okay, but like, let's work through this and come to a decision. I got a squeaky gavel off Amazon that I could hammer at the end when we got to our decisions. It was a good time. But yeah, so we finally came up with a design, and now we're in the process of implementing that design in the Terraform plugin framework repo. You can actually see the code we're working on right now. There are pull requests open, and we're working through implementing that. And we're hoping that we'll have a 0.1 ready for people to play around with real soon here. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Is we exited out of design mode and are into development mode, and I know the repo's not impressive today. We're hammering out the last few hard designy things that are really kind of foundational for the rest of it, and then I expect it to kind of spin up really quickly. But yeah, that's kind of where we are today. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, and I honestly think that's just so fascinating to kind of get that insight. You know, I could sit and listen to you all day, Paddy. This is great. Yeah, I think we have enough for like 8-hour podcast or something at least. It would be a lot of fun. But
that would be a lot of fun. But we'll put it on the calendar.
It's like, yay. I'd like to turn over to Kerim. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but do you have any questions, Kerim, or kind of any thoughts on this on that front?
I mean, first of all, just echoing what you're saying, it is so nice to get these insights, because like we use a tool day in, day out, and it's nice to always work with essentially the front end, but getting these insights and like understanding that, hey, the reason the SDK supports something in this very specific way is because we sat down and yes, we got us a gavel and made choices that way. I love those insights. To me, that's pretty cool. So I'm curious, for if you want to get involved with building and helping to build the future, of the SDK or contribute in any way, what's a good way? Obviously, Go right now still, but I'm curious.
So I've got 3 or 4 suggestions for you. I don't know. I'm not good with math, so we're gonna just grant me some leeway here as I start listing them off and pretend that it matches up to whatever number I just said. If you want to get involved, first of all, now is an amazing time to get involved. We are at a pivotal moment in the Terraform provider developer experience where this is a once every 5-10 years kind of moment for Terraform provider development, where the choices we're making today, we expect to stick with them for a very long time. This is my boss kind of looked at me and goes, Paddy, you like take as much time as you need to do this design, because this is it. Like we're not doing this again in 2 years. So now is an amazing time. if you're interested, if you're passionate about this stuff, if you have a lot of thoughts and feedback on your Terraform provider developer experience today, it's a great time to get involved. The best ways to get involved, obviously there's Terraform plugin SDK, the issues there, open issues, tell us about things, tell us what you like, what you don't like, let us know there. Terraform plugin framework, as I mentioned, all of this work is happening in public. Like we considered doing it all in private, like we did for Terraform plugin Go and Terraform plugin Mux, and I was like, nope, let's just do it right out in the open. We're gonna just literally sit down and everyone can take part and watch what we're doing, because at the end of the day, the hardest part of this process is building a system that will work for everybody, because it's just such a wide problem domain. We're talking about literally every API out there, is what we're trying to enable. And we don't know all of the things people are going to struggle with. We spent hours talking about what was going to be easy for people, what was going to be hard for people, what people might be expecting. So yeah, check out that repo. Let us know if you have thoughts. You can see PRs open right now where we're talking about things like, how are we going to replace resource data? How do you access the information that comes out of config and state? What are people going to expect? What are mechanisms we can provide for doing that? Let us know. Let us know if you like those ideas, or if you're like, man, this looks awful. We talk about everything in terms of developer experience impact, of this is what a developer is going to need to do. And if you're like, man, I don't want to do any of that, let us know. I would much rather hear that now than in a month, when it's harder to change. It's still possible to change, but it's harder. Early feedback is always better feedback, in my opinion. But yeah, feel free to comment on things, open issues. Whether you open an issue on SDK or framework, let us know what you're trying to do with your provider. Let us know what kind of problems you're facing, things like that. Issues either place, doesn't matter. We'll see them either way. And finally, the Discuss forum, that literally new threads there get piped right into our team channel. And I know we don't always reply to them immediately. We're a team of 3, and we're trying to maintain the old SDK, build the new SDK, and maintain a few other things at the same time. So we don't always reply immediately, but we see them. I see them come in as they come in. So yeah, let us know, give us feedback there. And finally, if it's something where you're like, hey, one of the single most helpful things any provider developer has ever done for me, the people at firehydrant.io, they're a DevOps company, and their CEO and founder decided he was going to build a Terraform provider on a live stream. And that is, if you've never seen anyone use your software live, that is the single most helpful thing in the world, to just watch somebody try and use the thing you built. Because I was like, oh man, I had forgotten there are so many unintuitive things that I take for granted after being a provider developer for 4 years now. That I'm like, oh right, that isn't just inherently obvious to everybody. And there are so many different design things that we learned from that that will show up in the work we're doing now. If you've got experience reports like that, if you have video of you developing a provider, if you have experience reports of being like, hey, I wrote a provider and here are the things that didn't make sense to me, that is invaluable. I would sell my soul for that. That is amazing feedback. So if you've got any of that, definitely throw them our way. Discuss in issues, things like that. That is amazing. I think those are the best ways to get involved right now. I'm going to say PRs are a little bit difficult at the moment to kind of get involved with. We're still kind of laying the foundations, and that's happening in a really high bandwidth way in our team. But once the foundations are there, PRs are appreciated. We will review your code and take a look at that stuff as well. Does that answer your question?
That it does. I think this apologies, our fire alarm just went off. That's okay. It's just a random test. This is what happens when you do things in production.
Yeah.
More importantly, yes, it absolutely does answer the question. I think the call for feedback is an important one. We do this with every office hours. We always ask users for feedback and practitioners, especially if you're using the SDK. Feedback is always welcome. So it does matter what kind if it's on Discuss, if it's on PRs, it is always welcome, and real people read it. I think that's the most important thing.
I think it's especially useful for us because practitioners, we at HashiCorp have kind of gathered into a community. We have HashiConf, we have ways of addressing practitioners as a target audience. But provider developers is a little bit of a harder group to reach. There's no mailing list for that. There's no one central way. Like this is the closest I get to being able to address provider developers. And so yeah, definitely kind of keeping an eye on those places for feedback. Joining the community basically is one of the best things you can do right now, and making your voice heard and making it possible for us to reach you is amazingly helpful right now, because that was a year ago as I was struggling with this problem and kind of being like, okay, we want to redefine Terraform provider development. Like, how do we talk with our community about this? I looked around and I was like, community team, help. And you all did, and it was amazing. But yeah, that was that's one of those things that you don't appreciate until you're in a position where you need feedback, and you don't know how to go about getting it.
I think that's a great point too. And it's kind of funny. You said fire hydrant and then fire alarm for Kerim. That's what it translated to. When
always happy to jinx Kerim. That's my goal here.
I think that was a really helpful point too. Two things that you hit on that I really want to go back to is one that you said that taking the time to really figure this out. When it comes to software, when it comes to any kind of like a technical product, it makes, you can either take a couple, you could take an infinite amount of approaches, honestly, but typically it's the, move fast, iterate, and keep changing things. But then it's really, like we talked about, it's really hard for people to keep up to date with that, unless they're really aggressively tracking that. I work within the Kubernetes space, and that's something that came up, within the past year was instead of 4 releases a year going to 3, just because while everyone wants to upgrade and do all these things, as you start to scale up, it becomes a lot harder to do so. So kind of making sure to ask those questions and get that feedback in, so like to figuring out when the right cadence is for all of these moving parts, and then for these underlying foundational frameworks, SDKs, and overall structures. I thought that was really, really helpful. To talk about. And I'm really happy that you have the ability to take the time to, does this make sense? Let's vet this out and test that. The second point that you brought up that I really liked was kind of like the getting to see somebody use your software live, and and live streaming. I'd even pair that, I would correlate that with empathy session, and kind of getting a sense of like, is what I thought this looked like, is this how this looks like to this practitioner, this end user, this person that's trying to execute this thing or do this task. I found that really interesting. I was on I got to hear Kelsey Hightower talk at an event recently, and that's something that he brought up, and just like really, I'd never heard of an empathy session before, and kind of like, hey, let's you made this product, let's sit down and let's either introduce some, like, removing the documentation or putting in a constraint, or kind of simulating what it might look like to use this tool for the first time, or experience this for the first time, or simulate what somebody might be going through as they use your product. So interesting to know, and also a good idea for a HashiCorp Live type of scenario too. Maybe we can make a Kerim, we'll talk. Maybe we can make a provider for a new pizza provider at some point in time, and do that live. That might be a lot.
One that serves a global community. I would like that.
I would love that, and when the framework is ready, I would love if y'all would try piloting our framework live for us. That would be invaluable. That would be awesome.
Maybe we could do an opinionated pizza provider too, because I know there are very strong feelings on pineapple on pizza or not on pizza. So maybe V2. Maybe we can introduce some policy as code. Who knows? We can make this fun.
Seems like a minimum viable product kind of thing to not have pineapple on pizza.
By product you mean pizza, right? That's what the P is for in MVP. Okay, good.
Bringing whole new meaning to minimum lovable pizza.
I love this. We have to do it now. It's you heard it here, folks. It's canon now. We have to do it.
Go register a corporation in Delaware. Pizza Provider Corp.
It's like Extra Cheese LLC. It'll be fun. Please don't register that. That's what we're gonna try to go for. Okay, good.
Yeah.
We'll look at domains next. To change things up a little bit, if you had to, I like asking questions that kind of focus on. Kerim and I work in community. Those are the questions I like to ask, and kind of like seeing the different lenses in which you can look at your technology, your framework, your ecosystem. If you had to pick a song or songs to describe the personality of the Terraform plugin SDK, what would those be? And take your time. I know it's putting you on the spot, but take your time on that front.
So I think okay, so I've got 3, and they are all from musicals because that's just the way I am.
I love it.
I know I'm already gonna love it.
So the first one is from The Greatest Showman. It's a song called "The Other Side," and I think it's an SDK song. Because it's all about negotiation. Like literally a business deal happens in the song. And it's all about these 2 people from 2 different worlds negotiating and meeting in the middle and kind of making a business decision to work together in the form of a song. I'm also going to pick, and I'll explain how this ties to the SDK in a minute, but I'm also going to pick The Room Where It Happens from Hamilton. Because it's all about, again, it's all about it there being like this locus of where something interesting is happening. And I think that's the SDK. I think that's the SDK, first of all, right now, again, because we're in that pivotal point for it. But I think that's SDK also because of the SDK's position in Terraform's architecture. And I promise I'll dive more into that one. And then finally, I'm going to choose... There's an Apple TV Plus show called Central Park, and Central Park has a song called "Imperfectly Perfect," which is all about how sometimes the things that are messy, the things that aren't tied up nicely in a box, are sometimes the best things because life is messy. And I know that sounds like a dig at, legacy software being messy, but it's actually, I think it relates to the SDK a little bit more because of the flexibility of the SDK. And I'll get into all of these now. Okay, so one of the things, when talking about the personality of the SDK, what I really think of is compromise and being between worlds. Because Terraform is about abstractions in my brain. Providers are in between Terraform and APIs. Terraform has a really naive view of APIs where it's like you're basically a key value store. I'm going to put things in you, I'm going to get things from you, and that's it. That's our relationship here. You can't change those things at all. And providers are what make that work with real world APIs, because APIs, of course, have their own idea of how they should behave, and it is very much never we are a key value store. And so providers are the translation layer between that. Terraform says, okay, I want to put this value in here, and then providers massage that into the right API calls to make the intent happen. And then it's like, okay, I want this data back, and they get that data back to the provider, and they massage it into the data that Terraform is expecting. And so they're kind of between worlds like that, but the plugin SDK is also between worlds, because the plugin SDK is the abstraction for providers to Terraform, but the plugin SDK is also the abstraction for Terraform to providers. And so we're kind of straddling this line of abstraction. And so that's really why I kind of think about it as the other side, because the SDK is there to exist in both these worlds at once and kind of be the compromise that allows them to work together and get this business done. And so that's kind of what makes me think of the other side there, is it's that same agreement that we're going to see both of these worlds at once, and we're going to compromise towards a solution that'll help us get something done. Which is kind of why I think of it as the room where it happens too, just because it's the locus of this compromise. It's it's where the magic happens between a provider saying, here's how you create, read, update, and delete resources, and Terraform saying, here's a graph, make some changes. Like that's where the magic happens in my brain. And so that's what makes me think of the room where it happens. And then imperfectly perfect is because if Terraform stuck to its guns and was like, no, every API must be a key value, get and set, and that's it, it would not be a useful tool. Like it just would not be, not even nearly as useful as today, but it just wouldn't be useful in general. But if APIs were like, okay, but we each are going to have our own idioms and our own like patterns for how to interact with us that we expect you to follow, you can't build a common tooling on that. Like you can't make that all work together in a consistent workflow that Terraform provides that kind of enables so much of its power. And so only by taking imperfect versions of those visions do you get the perfect solution at the end of it, where you've compromised both of those visions. They're no longer true to themselves. They're now imperfect, but you put them all together, and these groups of imperfect things make a better whole than the perfect versions of themselves would have. And so that's what makes me think of imperfectly perfect, is this idea that the plugin SDK at its core is all about taking things that are inherently messy, which are these different abstractions and these different ways that humans communicate. Because I know APIs are supposed to be machine communication. Is my fundamental belief they're about human communication. And so these messy abstractions and embracing that and kind of making that all work together in a way that I think is really powerful and unique and cool. And so those are my picks. That's kind of how I think about the personality of the plugin SDK, if it had a personality.
I really like that. It truly tells that story, and I liked that I loved all those selections too, because it's a project that has been around for a while. It's gone through a lot of iterations, and it's got a story to tell, and so I really like those choices. Yeah, I think that for most people's weekend projects, they're a little bit more short-lived, a little bit more just a burst of flame and then nothing. Usually I for those I'd pick like probably the Phantom of the Opera theme song, and then Over the Rainbow once you figured out the topic or concept. So it's but I liked your selections a lot more. Those fantastic. Cool. Awesome. Let's talk about the future with the Terraform plugin SDK. So I know that you mentioned kind of what you've already mentioned, kind of what's up and what's going to be happening here in the future, but past V3, or kind of like looking into as much as you can into your metaphorical crystal ball. What do you see happening with the ecosystem, with the plugin SDK? What are some of your predictions that you see happening in the years to come, or things that you'd like to see happen?
So first of all, we need to release V3, and releasing V3 is on its own a big thing, because I think a number of people ask me when it's going to be ready or when it's going to be out, and like I don't know, and that's not a satisfying answer to anybody, because they're like, we want you to release V3 so that we know that it's stable, so that we can build on it. But there's an interesting tension at play here, that I don't know that it's V3 until people have built on it, because I need that feedback loop to know that it's ready to be V3, but they're waiting for it to be V3 to get that feedback loop. So if I can ask something of provider developers, it's if you have the risk tolerance for it, if you've got the bandwidth for it, I promise we're not going to release V3 releases that are just fundamentally broken or that will break your provider. Usually the risk is going to be that you need to update some code or change some things in response to breaking changes. But if you've got the risk tolerance, if you've got the bandwidth in your organization for that, I promise we will give you new shiny features to play with, and that you'll be able to craft a better provider experience. But yeah, try it out, iterate on it with us, give us feedback, because we can. What I'm afraid is going to happen is that we're going to release V01, 02, 03, and we're not going to get any feedback on it. And we're going to be like, how do we get from here to V3, where V3 is we need sufficient feedback. So that's kind of the immediate future. looking out past that, the team kind of sat and talked and kind of dreamt up a vision of what we wanted to, if we could decide how plugin development would look right now and wave a magic wand and make it all happen. We've talked about a lot of really interesting things that I'm really excited about. I can't commit to any of these, so this is all spitballing. I can't commit it's going to happen, and if it does happen, I can't commit to it on any specific timeline. We've talked about shipping a new test framework, replacing helper resource with something that's a little bit more intuitive and a little bit more powerful, kind of giving it the same treatment that we're giving the SDK and the framework. So we talked about that. We've talked about maybe shipping a binary for a TF dev binary that's like a CLI for provider developers that will help automate and kind of take care of some of the more repetitive parts of provider development. Maybe, one of the things that I love about it is like, we were like, what if we could build in, what if we could build in a command into it that would let you automatically upgrade between different versions of the SDK. And so it'll just automatically apply those upgrades to your code for you using code parsing and modification techniques. And I was like, oh, that'd be really nice. We were like, what if we could provide a scaffolding tool that would let you say, hey, make me a new resource, and you could answer some questions about it, and it would spit out all of like the foundational, the bootstrapping code for that. What if we could do that for people and give them, so they could only they only needed to modify the interesting parts of the file. So that's something we've talked about. We've talked about what if we could do a minimum viable provider. Like, so we talked about there being different levels you can engage at provider developers with. The central core idea we have for what our vision of provider development is we want a provider for every API. Like, that's our goal. That's our flag in the ground, is we want to make sure that there can be a Terraform provider for every API out there. And I think for a lot of companies that got internal APIs, and maybe they're smaller companies, they can't devote a project to building a provider for those APIs, but they would still get value out of having a provider for them. And I don't think we can give them a world-class provider like our AWS or our Google providers or Azure providers, these providers that have teams supporting them, writing them by hand, and really designing for that user experience. We probably can't help them do that very quickly. I don't think there's ever going to be a replacement for a provider developer for the judgment of that. But I think you could get to a minimum usable, minimum viable provider using something like a protobuf file or an open API schema or something like that, and just generating right off of that document the actual provider itself, so that you could go from nothing to provider in 10 minutes flat. And I think that would be really cool and really useful. And I don't know that it's appropriate for every provider or even most providers, but I think there's a long tail of internal providers or providers with a few users, like with a low number of users, that the degraded user experience you would get out of that is worth the basically free development costs. So we've talked about stuff like that. I'm really excited to partner more with our education team to create more guides on learn.hashicorp.com for developing providers. I think one of the things that we've gotten better about in the last 4 years has been documenting what's going on in the SDK, but I still think that we're in our early stages of really getting the supportive resources and community around developing providers that you would need to really productively do it, and kind of as a newcomer come in and really kind of become an excellent provider developer in a quick and structured way. I'm trying to think if there's other stuff that we talked about doing.
While you think about that, let me just quickly break in, because I think our Learn team does deserve a shout out. For the past 2 HashiConfs, we've had workshops on how to build a provider. And we have another one coming up for HashiConf EU in 3 weeks, June 10th, I believe. Definitely worth checking out. It's still with a V2 SDK.
Yes.
But it is definitely worth just having the experience of essentially what was it? The split was, I think, 1 tutor for every 5 students. That was amazing to ask, spot on questions.
It was, and for reference, the last time we did it, I was the TA for it, so I was there in the room helping people develop their providers. This time at HashiConf EU, my colleague Katie Moe, who's brilliant and has been building the plugin SDK since before there was a plugin SDK, back when it was still part of the Terraform repo. She's going to be the TA for the HashiConf EU session, so definitely register for that. She'll be there to help you make sure it all goes well, and that she can answer your questions and help guide you in the right direction.
Yeah, we got a lot of good feedback last year. I was a TA as well. Totally enjoyed the experience, also hearing how people use the providers and how they build for it. And random fun fact, when we started these office hours, there were 1,048, not 10,048, sorry, 1,048 providers on the registry live. Now it's 1,049. I mean,
yeah, we've got a feed they pop in Slack every time someone publishes a new provider. Because that's my success metric. That's how I know that our team is doing a good job, because the more providers out there, the happier I am. So it's been really great seeing the ecosystem grow over the last few years. But yeah, and if the Learn team also deserves a shout out, the same, I shouldn't say the same. You can get sort of some of the information that's provided in that seminar as well as on learn.hashicorp.com. There's a great guide for developing your own provider on there that kind of walks you step by step through getting a provider up and running, building the HashiCups provider. So definitely check that out if you're interested in getting started.
Awesome. Well, I think we're getting close to time. I did see a couple questions in the chat, but I think that we've got time for just about one. If you've got a quick answer, otherwise we can kind of direct some of those to discuss.hashicorp.com and just kind of round things out. But one question I saw was, what access to the underlying graph structures from providers are exposed?
Pretty much none. And that is, I think, one of the great features of it, because Terraform abstracts all that way. We've got a nice clean separation where Terraform deals with all of the graph stuff, and it just says, hey, provider, create this thing, or update this thing, or delete this thing for me, or tell me what the current state of this thing is. And all you've got to do to build a provider, then you don't need to know anything about graph theory. You don't need to complicate it at all. You just need to respond to the requests that Terraform is sending you. If you want to know more about what those requests are and what information is in them, the Terraform docs in the repo, the Terraform repo has a docs folder, and inside that docs folder, there's a document called the Resource Instance Change Lifecycle document, which walks through what goes on when a resource changes and how Terraform uses providers to update the resource and state from that point.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's helpful to know, and yeah, I mean, I'm just getting more and more excited for checking out what V2 has to offer, and then just check out V3 and start working with some of those features. But thank you so much. Thank you so much, Paddy, for coming by this week. Thank you, Kerim, for being a wonderful co-pilot in terms of this community office hours. With that, I'd like to say thank you to everyone, and then go to you, Paddy, first, and then to you, Kerim. Do you have any parting words, wisdom, or anything interesting to share as we end today?
I don't think so. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great. Can't wait to do this next month. And yeah, happy terraforming, everyone.
A very merry terraform.
I think my only parting words are, if you think there should be a provider for it, you should definitely build it.
If you build it, they will plan. You heard it here, folks. Wonderful. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you all had a blast if you're watching live. If not, thank you for checking out this video, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much, everybody.